Everybody good? We ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is just tea. And it ain't twisted.
I mean, it's
We're
Saturday
not
night.
sponsored by them yet.
Well, hey, once we
I
get a
know, me and Bert
sponsor,
were just
though,
saying
I
that.
sure will.
Shoot, this party's gonna get lit at that point.
You
I
tell
was
them to
like, well, God,
sitting randomly around.
Yeah.
Don't forget about our sponsor, guys.
Go to your liquor store or your gas station immediately.
no, we're going to be here. Did they pay us yet? No. Change it. Pour it in a cup.
Yeah. It's still good.
Okay,
Uh,
let's start in five, four, three, two, one. Hey, yo, what's going on, guys? It's Matt Royalty. We're here today, and welcome back to another episode of the Royal Genius Podcast. We take a look at things affecting the Black community from a sociological and psychological standpoint. Today, uh, my co-host Booney is not feeling well, so I want y'all to send her all the well wishes in the comments. But we have a very, very special guest in the building, AZIZA KIBIBI. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well. We also have Curator and Bert. How y'all
What's going
doing,
on?
brothers?
Doing good, man. Good to see you again.
Always,
right.
always.
Good as always, brother. Got to be back.
So today the topic is overcoming trauma, and we're gonna jump right in with the first question. We're going to the "What's Your Theory" segment, and what are your general thoughts about trauma? And anybody can go first in any order.
Uh, for me, being in the medical field, I'll volunteer to go first. I believe it is not handled well and not taken serious well amongst healthcare in general. And a lot of people are on the, like, say your parents are on the, it's all in your head, just get over it, move on, you're grown. No matter how bad or worse it can be, from shell shock to, you know, even worse things. And in my own personal experience, I've had my neck slit, and I got PTSD from that when I was in a mugging. And everyone tells me it's all in your head, just move on. And a lot of these people who tell me this are also medical professionals.
All right.
Mm,
Oof. Woof.
mm.
Yeah, but it's like that's about as much as I can say on that from a medical standpoint without violating anything.
Yeah. I guess I'll go next. There's a lot of things that can actually cause trauma for people, from horrible medical mishaps to unsavory circumstances with other people. But the thing is, we as a society need to be more willing and more open to being able to provide services for those people so they can actually recover and become more functioning members of society rather than being stuck in their trauma. I know personally I've had some traumatic experiences in uniform and out of uniform, and I've had to seek therapy for it. And luckily, I know in the uniform part, like there was a stigma behind going out and seeking a therapist or getting counseling in any way, shape, or form or whatever. But like as I was in, like you started seeing that culture changing where mental health became more and more prevalent for people. Um, and of course, childhood experience. I had a couple of sessions where I had to go to a therapist, and my parents let me know it was okay. It's fine that you need extra help to get through this situation because it was really bad. So that's just my take on it.
Okay, so I think that people don't recognize the impacts of trauma and what it really means. Like you have, of course, you can be physically traumatized, right? Like Curator just explained, and your body has to heal from that trauma. But then there's the psychological trauma and also the cell memory trauma. So I think
Mm.
a lot of people don't take how many layers that is required to even address trauma into account. And yeah, I agree with Curator when he was saying about people say just get over it. And it's like, it's not that easy. You can't just get over things. Sometimes that shit is ingrained. I'm sorry, excuse my language, but
You can cuss. You can
Oh no, you're
cuss.
perfectly fine.
it's
I know
ingrained
everyone's
we're
fine.
on your cells. It's ingrained on your DNA. And I think even as a descendant of enslaved, stolen Africans, you know, so much trauma has been ingrained on us generationally, and it's not addressed and it's not taken into consideration, and that it goes as deep as like your genetic makeup.
Yeah. As for me, generally, I feel like trauma, especially being born as a Black person, I you kind of automatically have it. Like you said, it's something that's we have to deal with on some level or another. We all have some traumatic experiences, and a lot of the stuff stems from slavery. So I feel like trauma is inevitable coming from the Black community. But period, though, honestly, because it's kind of hard to navigate through life without experiencing something that could have traumatized you. You know, whether it's a loss, whether it's somebody doing something wrong to you, and I feel like it's important to understand that something that may have been traumatic to you may not be traumatic to the next person, and vice versa. So we can't
Mm-hmm.
look at it. We can't look at everything through our own lens. Like,
Mhm.
oh, this is just that wouldn't have bothered me. Instead of, oh, I understand. That's where empathy comes in and sympathy, because you may not fully understand. That may not have affected you, but don't negate the other person's pain. You know.
Right. And I think that it's important to note that an uncomfortable feeling or experience, not every uncomfortable feeling or experience is traumatizing, right? It's like when we talk about trauma, we're talking about long-term effects of a negative incident that happened to you in some form of fashion, not just, oh, you know, my heart got broken, I'm traumatized, or somebody cursed me out, I had a bad argument, now I'm traumatized. Like there has to be a lasting effect, and usually it manifests in the form of some form of PTSD, to really consider it trauma in the first place.
Definitely. The second question for this segment is: how do you feel trauma can negatively or positively impact someone's life?
Ooh. Well, negatively, I think, I mean, there's so many ways it could affect negatively. So for me, my father molested me from when I was 8 years old, and then he started raping me when I was 10 years old. And through that sexual abuse, there was also physical and emotional abuse. So I grew up being in a constant state of trauma. Now, it's kind of difficult for me to compare someone who has had a few traumatic experiences. Let's say someone who was traumatized as a child, maybe one or two incidents, compared to me who experienced that trauma over and over again for years. But it honestly, it kind of manifests as the same in a negative way, because then when you go into normal life situations, your whole perspective can be skewed. Like for me, I didn't escape my father until I was 24 years old. So I lived with being traumatized repeatedly for a long period of my life. And it made me untrusting and afraid of people in general. Once I finally did escape them, I then had this perspective that everyone was looking at me as some form of, you know, objectified sexual person that they would only use for their deviant desires, because that's all I knew from my father from a young age. As far as the positive sides, I think that every person is different, right? Like you said, every person is different. And I think people have different ways that they could cope, manage, and heal from trauma. And I did study psychology in college, and there is this type of resilience that some people just innately have that's not been studied well enough to know where does it come from, but it's actually been called magic, because most people, if you pile on enough trauma and struggle on them, they'll eventually break down. under the pressure. But there are some people that can actually grow from that trauma and become more resilient and more strong. And it's not really been discovered why that is the case. It just happens sometimes. And fortunate for myself, I was able to manage my trauma, cope with it, and then heal from it. But there are many people that cannot. They experience anything close to what I've experienced, and they want to commit suicide. They try to manage the pain through drugs and opioids and just negative behavior, trying to drown out what they experienced. So I do think, yeah, people experience it differently, but I think the initial approach on how to heal and cope with it is very different for every person.
For sure. Anybody want to go next answering the question? How do you feel trauma that can negatively or positively affect someone's life?
Trying to think of there's a lot I can unpack there. If I go ancestral wise, we have been forced off our lands, had forced into schools, had our hair cut and re-educated, and basically told we were savages with no souls. And then we stay on res, it's very poor, and you'll see everyone of every shade living on that reservation. And anyone could be a tribe that was native to everywhere from what you would call New York to Michigan to the East Coast, all the way, and all of them are rounded up in Oklahoma, and all of them had to be walked there. And then, like when people ask me about being native, they're like, "Well, you don't look native; you're pale." I'm like, "Yeah, we intermixed a lot, and the Black community and the Native American community have a lot of overlap because we mixed a lot." Me having a German parent, I get this one a lot, and my mom's half German, and then my dad's native, and they ask like, "Oh, whoa, you're white. You can't be German. How would that make sense? Why would a German and an Indian get together?" I'm like, they need, and I said, "Have you ever heard of fetish babies?" Because Germans would we be migrating into South Carolina, North Carolina, and intermixing with tribes there. Some of those were out of love, some of those were fetishism, and our culture was fetishized. It's still heavily fetishized today. You don't know how many times I get people coming up to me alone asking me, "Oh, why do you have feathers in your hair?" Or like, "Where'd you buy your jacket?" "Oh, what's it made of?" Or, "Can you give me an Indian name?" And the most annoying one that like this kind of bugs us, the like, "Oh, I have Indian in me too." You probably do, but blood quantum was made for dogs and horses. Period. So if you just the meaning our people, our religion, and everything down to we're just animals. And okay, and even we have our own ceremonies called our powwows, which I've shared videos of you guys on that, of the ones I videotaped. And we open anyone to come visit and share in our culture. Just don't, you know, overshadow us. Because like for us, it was always the Catholic Church. To this day, we're still digging up mass graves of our children that didn't survive the re-education camps. And we wear our hair. One of the main reasons we wear our hair long is for everyone who couldn't, and everyone who had their hair cut. Why I still speak my native language when I'm not using English. For my family, my ancestors who couldn't. Why I practice our sign language for those who couldn't. It's keeping our and if you go through, I'll wrap it up here. If you go through this American history, past slavery, past war camps, they were using us in World War II as code talkers because our languages were only native to our country. So they would have us, one of us, in each unit, and we write it up and translate to Cree to English, so the Americans could not be deciphered by the Germans. So our award was being used. We were promised something and never getting it. Vietnam, we were promised more back again because there's a special unit where they came to finding landmines. Our hair, if you had longer hair, it would pick up on the electricity coming off those mines. So they let us start growing our hair back if we were in service. What our reward was? Another slap in the face. And that's just generational trauma that all of our niches are still going through to this day. And more are becoming disconnected, losing their tribes, losing their languages, losing their clans. And in our faith, when we lose all of that, we lose who we are. It's like, you don't have an identity anymore. It's the same thing as you would like someone who would like burn their face. They feel like they lost who they were. If that makes sense.
I feel like trauma can negatively impact people's lives for the long term. As far as like for me, uh, I went through a lot when I was younger, including being homeless. But even too, I went through abuse when I was younger from my parents. It wasn't sexual, but it was physical. They hid it under the guise of the old school whoopings and stuff. But a lot of times I had welts all up and down my arms and legs, type of thing. And for a while, I feel like I accepted what I went through as, oh, I was just being bad, so I deserve to get whooped. I justified their behavior because I thought my parents were just doing the best that they could. And for a while, I blamed myself so long, so it negatively impacted me. I thought I was the problem, you know, as far as I was homeless for uh, almost 7 years, like living on the streets and going through that stuff. And my parents kicked me out when I was 17, and it even to this day, sometimes I realize that things are still affecting me. Like certain things are triggers, like being in certain spaces with certain people. Like I had to learn how to think on the fly, so I was able to uh notice different things from people just by being in a room for a few minutes. I can notice who was going to be possibly a danger to me, who's selling drugs in that place. And it's like it's still to this day I can notice, like, if I tell somebody we need to leave, this is not a good space for us to be in. you know uh they should listen to me. But positively, for me, the impact, I have a heart for people who have been through anything. That's why I did foster care, and I made sure to listen to the children most of all. So I had conversations with them, and I told them there was nothing that you can tell me that will make me judge you. Nothing that you could tell me that you've been through that will make me look at you any differently. This is a safe space. However you view life right now is how you view life. I'm just here to be understanding and to teach you what I know. You know, we have an exchange of information because you could teach me a lot of stuff that I didn't know, and those kids taught me a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I had all girls, and every single girl that I had was molested, and it hurt, me, because I'm like, how, and most of them got hurt by family members or in the system that was supposed to protect them. So it made me reach out more, and that's why I'm going to start a programs and stuff for homeless people and for kids. Like to just be free to be a kid. But that's how it negatively. I still have some of the negative effects. I don't feel like I'm fully free of it, but I feel like I'm using it to do good things. You can go ahead, Bert.
Um, I know everybody has covered a big spectrum of what was going on. So I guess I'll just use this piece to kind of let you guys know a little bit more about young me or something like that. So when I was a kid, I went through a 3 month stint at a hospital, had a flesh eating virus, flatlined 3 times, and almost lost my leg. And went through a bunch of operations to keep it. Had a bunch of scars, went through amnesia. I basically lost all memory of like my close friends, family, and everything else, and had to relearn who everybody was. But I never had like that same attachment that people normally have when you're like 5 or 6 and you've already built those bonds. So I had to start all over from scratch at that point. But like I know for me, one of the things that I dealt with personally was feeling like a pariah and just having that anxiety being around a lot of people. And for the longest time going to therapy for it, and then also just realizing that I felt like I didn't fit in, period, like, I guess I had the goal of pushing my body to the point where if it was going to fail, it was going to fail. Or, if I was just going to keel over, that was going to be the thing. But the point was just to start fresh somewhere else. So like around, I think it was 17 or 18, when you first start college and everything, I stayed close to my family because my mom asked me to and everything. But as tuition rates got higher, I got out of Kansas and joined the military. And I really didn't come to myself, and I really didn't actually get socially comfortable with people until like I actually got out of the place that I was. Just because of everything that I grew up with. When you flatline 3 times when you're like 5 years old, the school's going to announce that you're dead before summer started, basically.
Mhm.
So when everybody saw you come back to school the next year, they thought, you were a ghost or a zombie or something. And you're like, no, I'm still alive. And there were so many other situations that was just ridiculous that I dealt with. Even dating and not letting anybody that close just because I felt like I was not somebody that could be loved because I looked that different personally. Yeah, clothing wise, I can cover up every scar. You can't tell anything, but it's a vulnerability thing. And as a kid, I would tell my parents all the time, I'm like, no one's going to love me because I'm deformed because of a certain situation. And I did deal with that whole it's all in your head, just don't worry about it. I'm like, dude, the thing is there. You can look in the mirror. It takes up some real estate.
Mhm.
And then, once I enlisted and basically was able to do everything else that everyone else could do, you're like, yeah, so what? Scars there. I proved that I can do everything else. You were able to overcome that, if that makes any sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
It makes
Yeah.
plenty of sense to me.
We're gonna move. Oh, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Bert, so do you remember flatlining those times? Like, did
The
you
only time I remember is the third time. My parents told me the other ones or whatever, because like I guess round 3 when I came back, my dad was like panicking and everything, and I didn't know who he was. So I saw like a 6'3.5", 275-pound bodybuilder basically run out of the room crying, and I had no idea who he was.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you don't mind me asking. Oh,
Mhm.
sorry.
You
I
were
was
fine.
gonna ask, like, how long were you zeroed?
That I don't remember, and I don't know.
All right. It's like
Yeah.
I just was curious.
Yeah.
Let's move to the "Hear Me Out" segment with this question. What misconceptions do you feel people/society have about trauma or someone who has been through traumatic experiences?
Mm.
I think definitely what I mentioned before, that every little discomfort is trauma. I is trauma, right? Or is a form of trauma. And I think that it has a lot to do with social media and the spreading of kind of misinformation or reinterpretations of information. Um, and I don't know, I feel like, I mean, I'm Gen X. I'm older than all you probably. And
You got me by a couple years. It's just a little
I
bit.
have you by a couple years.
Just a little bit.
And a few, I see the younger people kind of trying to latch on to some of these labels, like, ADHD and PTSD, and it's like, and it makes me feel a certain way because what real PTSD, people can't function with it. It's not like, oh, something makes you uncomfortable. Real trauma affects your everyday functioning unless you go through a process of healing it. So wait, what was the original question?
What misconceptions do you feel that people/society have about
Okay.
trauma or someone who has been through traumatic experiences?
Yeah, so okay, so now I remember my frame of thought. So I think that the spread of misinformation about what it is. I just posted a video that explains gaslighting, what gaslighting is, because I feel like everybody now is saying, "Oh, if I had an argument with my man, he was gaslighting me." And I'm like, that's what you experience is not gaslighting. This is gaslighting. So I think that that is one thing, that's a misconception, that not every uncomfortable situation that you are in is trauma. And yeah, that's most of it. That's most of it. A misconception. I don't want to take over the whole thing, so somebody else talk.
No, you're good.
Damn.
You're good.
You're more than welcome to speak as long as you need to.
Yeah, we don't have time limits when it comes to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Oh. I'll follow up on that because I'm sorry, how you say your name? Aziza?
Caesar, yes.
All right. 1 point for me. Anyways, like for like the medical standpoint, I get kids like 14-year-old, 16-year-old. Oh, I'm PTSD'd from football. I twist my ankle, or I have anxiety. I'm just getting these things where people that and it comes to a funny story. Like when me and my girlfriend had exactly the day we exactly decided to become official. You know, I'm a trained martial artist. She was grabbing one of these things and she dropped it. And I caught it. The blade went right through my hand and it cut me deep. And I'm just blood gushing down. She's freaking out. She's a nurse. I'm a nurse. And I'm just like, huh, we're going to need some towels. And she's doing all that. And I'm just giving her a medical. I'm like, you see that in the white meat there? That's the subcutaneous tissue. Right there, she has a pulse. I severed the ulnar artery, definitely. I'm not going to feel that ever again. And she's like, how are you so calm? And I go down about 2-3 years back when I got mugged by two guys who tried to think I was an easy target. And I ended up getting stabbed and slashed over 50 times across my body. I still carry the scars. And one of them went across my throat. The only reason I really survived is because my dad always told me, keep a stick in your car. And I managed to pop my door open and I pushed one guy in the face with a ball peen hammer. And the other guy decided he didn't want anything after that. The cops only showed up, and apparently, I don't remember the rest of that. I grabbed the guy and said, we ain't done yet, motherfucker. And then I woke up in the hospital. And I was telling Bert a little bit about this last night because I had to go back to relearning how to say words, and W words are very hard for me. And just like in my daily life, walking around the house with my girl, she'll see me just suddenly stop in the middle of the floor, and I'll just start touching my neck, and I'll be looking at my hands, and I see blood, and she assures me you're not bleeding, and I'm on a medication for that to help handle the anxiety, but it does not stop the triggers. And I really don't like using that term because the Zoomer generation hijacked it, and everything they find offensive as a trigger. And I find that very disrespectful. People who've been through like sexual assault, and I'm not just saying that for your sake, because I've been a victim of that in one area. I don't want to go there, and our veterans, and then the stolen valor, because you have people who have had serious injuries I've had to patch up, and they had they'll be looking just fine, calm, peaceful, and everyone's like, yeah, he must be fine. I'm like, no, he just because he's calm and quiet, he can be having a whole scenario going in his head right now. And sometimes I hear things that aren't there. And, I live with someone and she has to be, she's an angel for her adjusting to it. And, not just because a lot of people, you got that, any kind of PTSD, you're too difficult. So, yeah, the whole gaslighting thing or gassing people up and everyone just wanting to be labeled on some form of mental disability as an excuse for their actions.
One thing that I'll say on this is, and because I feel like everybody else has given valid input for it, one thing in society that kind of bothers me when it comes to any type of trauma now is the fact that there's a generation of people that try to use that term for everything. And like you guys said, when it comes to like the ADHD, the autism, they try to slap as many afflictions on themselves. to make them special, or they don't understand what the definition of trauma is, or they don't understand the process of therapy or something like that, and they're just throwing it out there just to think that they're going to get more views or more follows that way. It downplays everybody else that actually is going through the process of healing and the people that are going through that and grieving and everything else. I think that's going to be my answer for this one.
Yeah, I feel there's the same way that everybody else said. It's the misinformation, people wanting to self-diagnose themselves that have never heard of a DSM. Like they want to put a label on themselves because it makes them fit in. And it's crazy because the generation before grew up where everything was a stigma. You know, going to get help was a stigma. Even talking to a therapist is a stigma. We deal with this in house, you know, type of thing. And now the fact that it's more talked about, therapy is more normalized. Everybody wants to jump on the train instead of, you know, just letting the people who have been through. It's okay if you have been through something, but if you really haven't and you say that, then you're negating all the people who have been through something. You're trying to minimize their story because you want to have the spotlight on you. So it's the misconception is the misinformation, and that we're all the same because our traumas, all four of us have different traumas, and we may deal with them in 4 different ways. So we're not all the same people. What were you gonna say, Bert?
I was going to say this too. Random shout out to the Navy and Marine Corps as well, because last week, the big chiefs basically put out an all hands memo, even telling them that they need to start looking at their troops' mental health even more, and they need to make it more socially acceptable for them to actually go out and get counseling. I mean, I think those were the 2 branches that were late to the game, but they're finally getting help for those troops as well.
Finally,
yeah.
The follow up question to this, and I think we kind of touched on a little bit. How do you feel about people who use their trauma as an explanation for their bad behavior as an adult?
They're trying to gaslight us. No, that is unacceptable, because I am one, and I mean I'm a mom, and I'm a more of a tough love mom, so I'm like, no, you have the power. I think humans are very powerful creatures, right? And our ability to be resilient, to cope, to manage, and to, what is the word? It's not conform. I don't want to use conform. To adapt to a situation. When I hear somebody using them being traumatized as an excuse for something, it's like, well, the difference between you responding to your trauma through bad behavior is a decision. Like, you made a choice to do it that way, because if you're conscious enough to know and to assess and say, oh, I did this because of my trauma, of what I experienced, then it really can't be true, because you now have had the forethought and have analyzed and decided to make an action or do something, whether it be commit a crime or hurt somebody else, because of what you went through, and you can actually articulate that, then that means that you have control over it. So even when you hear, I understand the theory of hurt people, right? But as me as someone who has been hurt in probably the most horrendous ways, like even what I share on social media. Royal, what is your name? I'm sorry, what is your name? Is it, it's just Royalty? Yeah.
Royalty
Daddy.
Royalty Row. So
Royalty Row is my stage name, but
okay.
Eldwin is my first name.
Okay, so Royalty, I'm sure you've seen, right, my other content, and my approach is, one, you know, to get the conversation started, but then dealing with how people make choices, how people can overcome their trauma, and yeah, the idea of hurt people. For me, like, compared to what I have shared, what I experienced was a lot worse. I mean, my father did some really, really sick things to me. So I don't have the desire, and I am, if anything, overly sympathetic and empathetic for how another person feels. And I can't even imagine doing some of the things that my father did to me to somebody else. So I'm like, well, clearly those people that have that response and make the decision to impress their trauma onto someone else by making them feel the same pain, they have some healing to do on another level, because at the end of the day, it's a decision. You are a person who is making choices, and you could choose to either go this direction or that direction. So, but like I said, I'm like a tough mom, although my older kids tell me that I spoil my youngest. So I just feel like people have the capacity to make good decisions, or at least better decisions than what a lot of them do, as far as how they respond to other people based on their trauma or based on what they've experienced.
Yeah. Before I answer the question, I wanted to ask you something. You said you were molested and then were raped. What's the difference? Because I've always thought that molestation just said that it was a child rather than an adult.
No, adults can be molested as well. Essentially, molestation is a sexual act that is impressed on someone who is weaker than the offender, right?
Mm.
So the reason why I say it could be adults is because you can have an older adult or a person that is in a position of power molest, sexually abuse someone without penetration. So that would be, fondling, forcing them to perform oral sex on them. Those are considered molestations as well. Yes, it is applied to children the most, because there is a clear delineation between an adult and a child. But and then rape, that includes penetration, that includes intercourse. So my father started molesting me at 8 years old, and it did not include intercourse. But then at 10, he did actually rape me, which included intercourse.
I really appreciate that clarification, because I did not know. That's very. I'm gonna actually put that in the description, because I did not know that the difference is.
Yeah.
Um, how do I feel the people that use their trauma as an excuse, a lot of times it's intentional. If you intentionally impose your trauma on someone else, to me that makes you a bad person, because you're choosing to do the bad thing that was done to you onto somebody else. Or it could be as simple as people, like, I'm diagnosed with depression and PTSD, um people misusing that or whatever, saying, well, I'm bipolar, so they'll do something really horrible to you, say something really, really messed up. Well, I'm bipolar. You gotta forgive me. No, I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
No, I
That's,
don't.
yeah.
I don't have
Right.
to, I don't have to forgive you. And I before I would be try to be understanding, but now I don't have a tolerance for it, because as an adult, we have this great thing called critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We get to make a choice. And if you made the choice to be an asshole to me, it's my choice to say I don't want to mess with you anymore. Though that you get one chance, because we all can control ourselves enough to have a conversation, even in the midst of a disagreement. There's
Right.
there's only so far that I will go for me. If I get to that point where I feel like I'm getting very angry with the situation, you know what? I'll talk to you later, because I can't process this right now. But most of the time, if we got to talk it out as adults, we got to talk out the issue, and it's despite your whatever you have been through. Because I've been through a lot. People have been through a lot, but you can't use that as an excuse to hurt somebody else, because there's never an excuse to hurt somebody else.
Right. Now, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but 99% of serial killers have been abused or molested as a child.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But so, okay, we can look at that kind of statistic and try to say, yeah, that abuse might have contributed to their bad behavior. But at the end of the day, they still made a choice. Like, even with my father, people ask me all the time, well, was he abused as a child? Or, maybe someone touched him, maybe. And I'm like, that's no excuse.
It doesn't matter. It's like,
I'm like, that is absolutely no excuse for him. So it's sometimes it annoys me when people ask that, because they seem to ask from the perspective of, well, I'm trying to explain what he did to you away, and it's supposed to make it better somehow. But yeah, it's just like, well, then if everybody's sitting here claiming that they have been traumatized, and that means, if you take that the hurt people as an example, then that means we should be afraid of everyone. We should be afraid of everyone, and everyone is going to hurt someone because they have been traumatized themselves. So I agree with you as far as critical thinking.
I feel like as a society, we want to humanize everybody. When some people just need to sit in that monster role. So I watched the Dahmer thing. Speaking of a serial killer, and I
Oh,
feel like the beginning of it was trying to say, his parents were bad. Yes, his parents were terrible. They were terrible people. But did that justify him murdering people?
No,
No. No,
no.
he was still a murderer. He was still a bad
Right,
person.
and
right.
if you remember, they also tried to use his sexuality as a reason why he was so messed up.
No, that he had a problem, and I honestly feel like his parents have to take some blame too. And I hated the fact that they went around apologizing to everybody when, no, you could have nipped that in the bud a lot of the time, beforehand. A lot of stuff that he was doing was out in the open, kind of things. You could have seen things happening, but once he became an adult, it's like, okay, that's fully on him. No matter what he went through, his parents were shitty. Yes, great, but it doesn't justify the bad person he was. Does
Yeah,
anybody? Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I felt like I didn't watch the entire series, and I read a lot of people's perspective of that series, saying that they felt like they was trying to make you sympathetic to Dahmer because of his parents. And honestly, I'm like, I felt like what he did was more about his privilege than anything else. Was just more about him expecting that, I'm a white male and I could get away with shit, because he like had no respect for life. It was just about satiating what his desires were. And I do think, based on I have not done extensive research on Dahmer, and I understand that that was, a dramatization. Um, but I do think that what they showed, how his father treated him with his exploration of like gutting animals and things, um, I think it did give him as a child this perspective of he could just do whatever he wanted to make himself feel good. And I think that's what led to, some of the other stuff. So like it didn't, nothing else mattered. I mean, I'm all for encouraging a child's natural exploration of certain things, but certain things just need better guidance.
Exactly.
Certain
Most
things
definitely.
That 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 movie was a shining example of white privilege if there ever was one.
yes, yes,
Because
it was.
there was twice where the police could have stopped him, but they gave him the benefit of the doubt because he was
Yep,
white. The
because he was
benefit of the
white.
doubt that we will never ever be able to get. That
Right,
you get pulled over and, wait, you were speeding and you're drunk. No, just drive home. We drunk. You getting pulled out the car.
right.
You know, or the this is my boyfriend. No, no,
A
no.
kid, a 14-year-old
Right?
kid. Right. I was like, wait, what?
Oh,
And
I
if
never
you
watched it.
Questioning?
if you see the real picture of this kid, he looked like he was 12.
Yeah, I saw it.
Like,
and
Wow.
Looks
the
like
one thing I want, the one thing I want to add is the people that were accusing him were, black women. So the cops just like, eh.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the fact that he even chose that neighborhood to live in, you
oh
see,
yeah,
that was all calculated. I think he knew what he was doing.
the
So
neighborhood, the everything. He had
yeah.
that calculated down. That it's more
Yeah.
sick than everybody wants to give it credit for. But let's move on to the let's fix it segment,
Oh,
so we don't have you here all day. Oh, did you have
I'm
something to say?
sorry. I didn't get to ask Angela
Uh,
Um,
the
the
whole
the question
last
is,
question.
how do you feel about people who use their trauma as an explanation for their bad behavior as an adult?
Yeah, this is going to be a very quick one because ex girlfriend knew of my, mugging, stabbing, all that, and she always claimed to be bipolar, and she got upset in some argument, and she took that as an opportunity to draw a blade on me and pointed it at me, and I had my hands up, and she walked me all the way through every room of my house till she made a corner. I'm like, if you get any closer with me, I'm gonna put you in the floor. And she tried to get closer. I grabbed her hand, ripped the knife out of her hand, threw it across the room, pushed her down on the floor. And then she got scared, and I called my parents. She called her mom. She moved the F out. She was trying to, use my trauma of fear that is ingrained to get her way. And then try to say that she has anger issues. And that's why, it was just like one-time thing. Like, no, it ain't going to be a one-time thing if you're willing to go that far. So that's my one little bit I can share on that real quick.
Did you have anything to add before we move to the next segment, Bert?
No, okay. Not at all.
This one is the less fixing segment. Do you think there's a proper way to deal with someone who has experienced traumatic things?
Do your research for the first point. If you are in a relationship with someone that has been victimized, has PTSD, anxiety disorders, like something like GAD, a more common, more generalized one, you can go on YouTube. If you say you love this person, you can go on YouTube and watch a 10-minute video of just simple little things, and might make some corrections, because if you love someone, you're supposed to love them for the flaws and all. It's like my current girlfriend, if she's cooking, she knows that if I walk in the kitchen, if she has a knife, she always faces it downwards. So now I know it's not being pointed at me, because a lot of people like to talk with their hands, and when that happens, I'm always doing this and following the blade with my hand. And it's just, I'm conscious. I'm just more focused on that than, anything else. And just like I say, it really comes down to doing your research. And just because this person, like me and Bert, like say we both went through the same type of trauma, just because his trigger is different than my trigger doesn't mean you can, like, well, look how calm Bert's doing. You're the one that's breaking down today. And it's like, you're not trying to understand, not trying to relate. It's like, if you want to fix something, you need to try to understand it. You can't just go and fix your motor of your car without having any idea of where the gas tank is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's my short version I can think of on that one, because I see it a lot. And I'm lucky I finally have someone who is taking the time and learn these little things and do her research and doesn't hold it over my head. Anytime I have one of my PTSD moments, she just calms me down, tries to get me to sit down, and reassures me everything's fine, and asks me if I've taken my medicine or anything like that. She's doing her research. And a lot of people just say it as, you're too difficult, you on this. I want to have someone who doesn't do that, and they're usually going into someone who has unaddressed trauma and just taking it out on you. And that I guess that's a upgrade of a relationship versus you being the one that needs help, especially, I guess English is hard today.
I understood everything you said, brother.
Right.
Thank you.
English is not hard, and we're here for you.
You want to tackle the question next, Bert?
Sure, I'll be brave. Can you repeat the question?
Do you think there's a proper way to deal with someone who has experienced traumatic things?
So, going off of what Curator said, make sure you do your research. And then another thing is to just be loving and supportive for them. You don't know what their journey is going to entail. Make sure that whatever that journey entails, though, make sure that they're not trying to weaponize their trauma on you, like we talked about earlier. Make sure that your moral compass is still intact, but still be loving and supporting for that person. I know early on, from what I talked about earlier, some of my fears I had when it came to relationships early on, when I started dating and getting close to people and all that, some of those came to fruition. Some people were really shallow. And, they would see it, walk out the house, or just stare and gawk at you or whatever. And you're just like, yeah, all right, this ain't going to work. No. And, from that point, I could have just went into the whole, oh, everybody's like that. I'm just going to be a hermit and not do anything. But I realized that those people weren't for me. And, over time, I've been able to gained friends and people that are closer, and I've been able to speak with them. And, even I've had a couple of relationships that worked for a while, and, of course, they just went their normal course, and then you just move on with your life. But if I were to have shut down and not been willing to accept whatever love and support and whatever experience that was going to be, then it would have been a whole different story.
I think there is a proper way, but I think y'all really kind of like dissected that already. So I want to say, speaking of the point of view from the traumatic person, you need to know your worth and get out of situations that you shouldn't be in. If you see somebody is not handling you the way that you want to be handled or treating you the way that you want to be treated, then dip. Get out of there as quick as you can. Like, because you don't have to deal with whatever because of what you've been through. Because there is somebody out there that will accept you. There is somebody out there that will have the patience with you. You're not asking them for too much. And that's for me too. I'm speaking to myself because I thought I'm asking somebody for too much to listen to me or be understanding when I'm depressed. I'm asking for too much for them to have an understanding. I'm like, that's not too much for the right person, but it's impossible to do that with the wrong person.
It's 100% true.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think communication is important. I think communication is important. I don't mean just talking. I mean like active listening as well. I tend to be I'm I definitely communicate because while I have healed from a lot of the sexual trauma that my dad um inflicted on me, there are still certain things that, I there's some time, especially when it comes to sex. So, but I talk about it. I talk about it. I'll bring it up. I'll say, well, no, I'm not afraid of like ruining the mood or anything like that because it has to be dealt with. Like, well, no, if you want to be with me, then you have to take this into consideration. And I feel like even for people that aren't traumatized, everybody's path is different and everyone has experienced different things. So when people seem to act like, oh, well, it's I have to put extra effort in order to be in a relationship or be a friend to someone who is dealing with PTSD or dealing with some other form of trauma, I'm like, there's a bunch of other people that have all kinds of other BS that you have to deal with anyway. So that's just relationships. That's just dealing with people. We have to deal with different cultures and different religions, and everybody makes adjustments for those who they care about. But, it can be tough sometimes. Casually dated someone who then went and announced on a public platform that he would never deal with somebody who was abused by their father. And I'm like,
Ooh,
What
yeah.
the fuck?
And I was like,
the
wait,
audacity.
what?
Wow. Wow.
Wait, what? And this is how I find out, And that, I mean, it kind of pissed me off. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, you know what? Clearly that person is immature and could not have a conversation with me directly for whatever reason. And the thing is that they were a survivor as well, but clearly they had a lot more healing to do. So I try not to internalize it. I don't really get offended because honestly, some of them just don't have the capacity, or they're being misguided, or they just need more time, and I understand that. But in general, now when I deal with people directly who have been raped, molested, abused in some way, and I'm further on my healing than they are, then I am definitely sympathetic and empathetic. But it's really all about communication because I want to know, well, if I care about you, I want to know what is it that I need to contribute to your healing journey. And I think at the end of the day, it's really about how we interact with each other and who we mesh with, who we kind of can get along with, and even on a spiritual level, like who do you connect with as far as the spirit, because we are spiritual beings having human experiences, and you know the effects of the human experience on the spiritual being can be tough, but we really have to connect on that level in many ways in order to really be able to like get the best out of this experience.
Right. Before we
Like,
move,
I would like to add on to like when you say like connecting to people, because like I met Bert through this channel, and me and him have gone lives with just us being, talking, and it's like we have basically like become brothers, and we've never met in real life,
Oh yeah.
and
Really?
and
Yeah.
yeah, say we've all been talking about getting this podcast together at some point and trying to meet somewhere within the range of Virginia, since most of everyone is there,
Wow.
and I just kept making jokes for I'm gonna make sure I sit next to Bert with a whole gallon of milk because he's lactose intolerant and he has the best microphones.
before
I
we,
carry lactate on me, mofo. So I've
before,
learned.
before we move to the next segment, I did want to add on one thing. I feel like a lot of people are not good friends in general. If you are a good person and a good friend in general, then dealing with somebody, anybody, you just are understanding. You know, I feel like you're more understanding than other people would be. So I feel like a lot of times people just, oh, it's a lot of extra. Like you said, you have to deal with people in life, period. You have to. It's a part of living. So don't sit, I feel like it's messed up to sit there and say, oh, well, if they've been through traumatic experience, I can't talk to them. What if your friend has asthma? Is that hard for you to deal with too?
Right, right.
Is that hard for you to deal with too? Your friend is Islamic and they decide they don't want to eat pork. Is that hard for you to deal with too? Like, is what is hard about it? If you really
Yeah.
a friend with somebody, because friendship for me is whatever you're going through. Because I know life happens, and life could smack you upside the head if you walk outside today. You never know, and I'm not gonna stop being friends with someone just because they're going through something.
Right.
Amen.
Yeah.
I can vouch for that because I had a very bad day and the Royal called me up and let me just vent to him.
Yep.
And last thing I want to add before we move on to something else is anyone watching this that has trauma, and if you're in a partner thing that's taking advantage of it, it's not your fault. Your journey of healing is going to be a different pace than everyone else's journey. And like how you said, you other people on different stages of your recovery versus their recovery. In my culture, we have a saying. Best way I can translate to English is you have to kill yourself many times before you become this calm. And
Mm.
it basically means the version of you 3 years ago is a different person than who you are now.
Mm.
So as you go through your journey, you're constantly, you know, killing that version of yourself and evolving into a better person and handling things better.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have anyone who's telling you these things, because this is what they always tell natives, oh, you're having this problem, have a drink, go have a smoke. Those are band-aids on bullet wounds.
That actually is a perfect transition for the next topic, which is the story time segment. This is the last heavy segment, guys. So it's gonna get a little bit lighter from here.
Okay.
If you feel comfortable, can you share some of the traumatic things that you have been through and how you cope with or transcend your trauma?
Mm.
Should I go first?
Mm.
Can you repeat the question one more time so I can process that a little better?
If you feel comfortable, can you share some of your traumatic things that you have been through and how you cope with or transcend your trauma?
All right.
You can go first, Aziza, if you want to.
Okay. I mean, I kind of covered, right, my background from before. I want to get more specific. So, my father, when I was 10 years old, he had already started raping me. But he then introduced his girlfriend into him abusing me. He was polygamous, even though he was married to my mother, he also had girlfriends. So, one day this one girlfriend who none of me or my brothers and sisters liked at all, he decided to bring her into the bathroom when I was using it, and he raped me while she watched. And then after that, he would invite her every weekend to stay over. And essentially, I don't like using the term threesome with me because I'm 10 years old and these are adults, but they would then abuse me together. And that affected how I already had the idea of, well, how men would possibly see me, because my dad did a lot of fear mongering to me as far as trying to convince me that I should be grateful for what he's doing with me and the fact that he took my virginity. Now no other man would want me, so on and so forth. But now then here is this woman. And even though I was being forced to interact with her in this way, I preferred her over my father because she was gentler than he was. And I think that then by the time I went into adulthood, and I escaped him, my idea and my perspective of men was that, men were so aggressive and hard, and I really had no interest in having a sexual relationship with a man. But then the idea of a woman more appealed to me, even though in my mind, and I feel like in my spirit, I wasn't necessarily attracted to women. Does that make sense?
A lot of
Yeah.
sense.
So it was only because of my experience with this woman at a younger age and her being the lesser of two evils, then kind of manifested in my perspective as sex with a woman was pleasant because it wasn't as bad as sex with a man. So that's how it kind of manifested in me, and I had to focus on working on that. I mean, I had to do a lot of studying of sexuality even to get my body to respond to it, because I didn't understand. I hated what my father was doing to me. I got no sexual gratification, which a lot of people assume that if a woman is if a man touches a woman sexually or interacts with her sexually, she's immediately aroused, and that's not the case. Your brain is the brain is the biggest sexual organ, and you have to approach a woman on a mental level in order to prepare her for the physical sex. So with my father, it was all fear, plus the fact that he was my father. In my mind, he was always my father. Not anybody I was attracted to in any way. He was making me do things that I didn't want to do. So I had no pleasurable connection with what he was doing to me. And having that all through my adolescent, through my teenage years, and through some of my adulthood, I did not think that sex was even anything to enjoy. So then I had to work on healing that aspect. And that really started with a lot of scientific study. Like I have every book about sex that you can name. I have encyclopedia of sex and fetishes, and I had to really approach it that way in order to then start accepting it as something that was not painful. And I mean, the other thing was that clearly I understood that sex was to make children because I had 4 children by my father. But as far as I was concerned, it was something not to enjoy. I hated kissing, and I had all of these issues when I first escaped him that then I had to consciously work on. And it started with first studying it from a scientific standpoint, from a physical standpoint, and then exploring it by myself, with myself, using masturbation and different types of sexual stimulations. And then I was able to kind of introduce, a male that I cared about, and then continued from there. So
Uh,
that's how I got over that specific trauma. Healed from
Wow.
it, not just get over it, but yeah,
right,
healed.
right. I like that you said healed.
Yeah.
It's a whole process. Who wants to go next? If you need me to read the question again, let me know.
Yeah.
Definitely redo the question.
Yeah, please.
If you feel comfortable, can you share some of the traumatic things that you have been through, and how did you cope with or transcend your trauma?
Well, so you guys all know that I'm a twin. I have a twin sister, and there was always a heavy favoritism towards the girl with my mother, and me being a more emotional child, my dad always told me it was okay to cry and all that. Well, then my mother would berate me for crying and you know, call me everything from being a pussy. You should have been born a girl. When I was born, my lungs were not supposed to fully develop. I should have been dead if I knew it. Would have known this. I wouldn't have had you. And then growing up into adulthood, I'm basically used for thought of as spare parts because my sister has big mental problems of self harming, and we're both O negative, and we're both compatible with each other. So I'm treated as spare parts and was called spare parts. And that was basically deemed as my value in life. And then that's coming from the first woman interaction. And then when I started dating, I felt like I had to be useful to women for them to be around me. And I had to provide them with something. I have a house, I have a car, I have money, I'm stable. And then, I'm always, agreeable with them. And then, some reason or another, they'll like walk out of my life. And I'm just thinking, well, I did this, 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 and this, and this. Like, what's my self worth? And then, I met someone I'm dating now who doesn't treat me that way. And she's overly nice to me. And it gets me to the point where I'm looking at her like thinking, what does she want out of me? Because it is one of the things I'm questioning the genuality of it. And it's even when we get like little petty arguments or disagreements, it ends there and it doesn't fall over into the next day, next week. It doesn't come up a month later. Like, oh, I'm in college. I stayed over an hour. It's not like, oh, well, you were late that day. You didn't tell me. Like, none of that stuff happens. And I got so accustomed to dating girls who would accuse me of cheating or just use me for like before I met her, I went on a date when I started dating again after I lost my, 6-year partner who passed away. And started dating again. This girl wanted me, it was just too happy to spend my money, just back and forth. And she's like, well, you're the man, you pay for the date. And then, she sees my house and her eyes just light up. And I ended up sending her home. And I was like, no, you are just after what I can provide. And I'm at the point where I was done doing that. If so, and now that's why when I started entering dating again, I make sure that every first date is causes no money. Let's walk to a park. Let's talk. If you want to go to an event, we can go to the bowling alley. That's like $5. It's not gonna be nothing extravagant because this is the first date. You're supposed to get to know me, and it's like it gave me a big distrust for women that wanted to date me. But I've always kept female friends because when I try to have male friends, they like try to get me into drinking or smoking to deal with problems like that, and they or run through rip and run through the streets, and oh, why don't you just cope with sex, cope with alcohol, cope with this? And I had an extent when I had a relationship so bad that I felt a job I hated, and I was drinking more and more and more and more, and my sister was doing the same thing because we weren't addressing our own mental problems from our upbringings. And where she was favored, and now the whole world, the real world, isn't treating her like a princess. And while I'm got used to being treated like garbage, and I'm handling the world a lot better than her. And it's like, and I eventually decided, like, look, I'm noticed how much money I'm spending on my drinking. I went and decided to cut that off and detox, and now 2 years later, I say that I'm sober, but I do drink beer here and there. But it's not like at my worst, I was going through 5 bottles of rum a day. My tolerance was so high, I couldn't do that, and I was even drinking at my. This wasn't a medical facility because this is when I was trying to pay for my schooling. I was working at a factory, and I was drinking on the job, and I could be highly functioning on that. And it's just I had the tolerance for it. And then, when I got off the stuff, I tell you, detox is hell when you get off alcohol like that. Like people want to talk about, nicotine withdrawal. It is nothing because people can't actually go cold turkey and your heart can, flatline from suddenly stopping a heavy inflow. And like me and my sister's process, we got sober together. It went from us doing the hard stuff to lowering down to something like sake, to lowering the wine, to lowering the beer, and then off it. And now, years later, that we're both clean, she has a goal for herself because she was more addicted to it than I was. And if that makes sense, she just gravitated it more. It's like she has a 5-year goal that she wants to have a campfire and drink a wine or have a beer like we used to do when we were teenagers. And I have our family land, that I managed to reclaim, our tribal land, and we want to do that. And now when she comes to visit, I don't bring anything around her, and it's just I'm always thinking in my head to this day, like I joke a lot with Bert about the twisted tea, and I'm like, I still have that one box, and I have Bert on, and I was just using one can per episode, and I was just telling him this last night, and I get worried with myself that if I drink too much, I'm gonna fall back into those old ways. But the girl I'm dating, she knew me, she met me when I was at my worst, and then we kind of started talking more and more, and she supported me through my cleaning up my act, and then we ended up starting dating. And now she sees me drink beer, wake up on my day off. I just want to relax, get on a live, watch TV, and have a beer or something like that. She is perfectly okay with that because she knew what I was and sees I'm not spiraling out of control. And I'm opening up about my emotions to her. And like the first time I ever cried to her, she said, "This is the weirdest thing because I never had a woman say this to me." She's like, "I'm glad that you can cry." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "I've never seen a man that was comfortable crying to his woman." And it's like I told her, the whole point of me is you got to be a man's piece at some point. Well, not a man. Your partner should be your piece. So your worst best. And I guess that's the easiest way for me to translate all that because just being I think they did a similar movie to it where they were having some kid constantly be transfusing blood and organs into their older sister. I think it's like My Sister's Keeper or something like that. My girl was telling me about it. I haven't seen it, but yeah.
All right, if you're ready, Bert.
Um. Oof. Oof. Okay.
Whatever. Remember, is whatever you're comfortable with, bro.
All right. So we've already covered the medical thing. We covered basically in the past how I've gone through that stage. I know in more recent years I have done some unhealthy coping for a couple situations. Like back when I was in the military, I had some friends that I was in high school with that ended up joining as well. And during some missions, they ended up, you know, passing away violently. And these were kids that I grew up with. One was an immigrant to the States, and he ended up joining, our little ROTC unit back in high school with me, and he ended up being my sergeant major. Didn't see him for many years, and then I saw him when he enlisted, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's one of my boys from back in the day. And then, like on one of the convoys, he ended up getting unalived by an IED. So that was unfortunate on that situation, and that weighed very heavily on me and everybody else at home. And I remember like his father kept his Facebook up and everything, and of course dad was going to the grave every day. And I think he was still doing that up until last year or until the pandemic. Um and then during the pandemic, I know and the way that I coped, because I said it was unhealthy, was of course with alcohol. And I went a little heavy on that, but for some reason at some point in time my brain clicked and it was like, dude, you're just trying to put a bandage on a wound and it's not working. It's really not. And you went through therapy for that and then got out of that rut. And then my grandmother, she passed away from COVID. Um, I want to say like shortly after like the pandemic was announced to everybody and everything else. My family back at home had to get together. I stayed back here in Virginia because I was like, I'm not going through an airport. I'm not getting this. I don't know anything about it. But they all gathered and they all got COVID, and a lot of my family ended up in the hospital. My mother did, My grandmother did. My grandfather did. My aunt did. My sister, one of my sisters did, and a couple of my cousins ended up being in there. My mom and my grandmother and my grandfather, they were all on the tube and everything, and they had to put my grandmother in a medically induced coma, and she didn't make it. And
Man.
what was bad about the
Condolences.
situation was I was so far away, I did not feel comfortable traveling home, but because of the family chats and everything, and stupid me trying to be high tech, I had the whole house smart integrated. So no matter how you tried to get away from it, you were always getting a notification. You'd be playing like on a game console, you get the little Facebook message chat. You'd be in the bathroom and Alexa would go off. Just whatever. I couldn't escape it. And I remember I was working from home. I think it was like one Friday, and I was in the middle of a meeting and my iPad went off. And what I see is my grandmother on life support, and they were like, "We're about to pull the plug. You were grandmother's favorite, so we thought you should say goodbye first." So I'm looking at my grandmother, and of course, my aunt tried to say that, she's comfortable. And I'm like, no, she's not comfortable. She's on her deathbed. She's got a tube down her throat, and you're about to end her little bit of life that she has left.
On camera
And
at that.
yeah, on camera, on an iPad Mini, Retina display,
Right.
high definition. I'm looking at my grandmother, tears down her eyes, completely out of the world, and I say my piece because, of course, being the grandkid that's traveled around the world and everything, I have not been home that often. And I think my son has only seen my grandmother maybe a handful of times. And one of the things that I wish that I had more was more time with her. So I said my piece and everything. And of course, I got off. I took off for the rest of the day. And it started into another spiral of booze. Because, granted, I couldn't talk to my mom. I couldn't. My dad and my mom have been separated since I was like 6 years old. They've been divorced that long. So, like, your support system there is very deteriorating. And of course, me and my dad, we don't talk about vices because his mother, when they were on the reservation in Alaska, she was an alcoholic. So I don't bring up my booze situation with dad or anything along those lines. It's just, I'm handling this. I'm doing a nightcap every night. I'm going to sleep. During the morning, before I get on my meetings at work, I'm taking another swig. Midday, taking another swig, just heavy on it. And I get the phone call, hey, mom's awake. Mom's fine. We briefed her on everything. She knows what's going on with grandma. She's going to call you. I tell her everything that happened. She's like, oh my gosh. And she's like, I knew they shouldn't have done that for you. I'm like, but you were out of the picture. Don't even worry about it or anything else. It's going to be fine. And I'm like, this wave will pass for me as well. And I went through a bad breakup during that situation too. That was a whole nother nightmare as well. The girl was an alcoholic. But I ended up sitting at a McDonald's parking lot, and I ended up eating a McRib, and it was the nastiest thing I ever ate in my life. I and like something just kind of woke up in me, and it's like, bro, if you were just in the right state of mind, you could totally make something a lot better than this. Get your shit together. And like, I literally went home and I made me a good dinner, and I'm like, okay, we can't go down this path ever again. We have to do better. So
Wow.
that's my crazy life of whatever this is
Well,
and how I
you got
handled
more
it.
time than I thought.
Oh yeah,
So you made a decision? You ended up just making a decision, Bert?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone through trauma since I was a kid, so at this point, um, you know your behaviors and you know how to handle situations at that point. And I can feel when I'm slipping, so I know that's not for everybody, but that's where I'm at now.
Can I ask a question
Shoot.
I don't have much experience with alcohol. I mean, I don't have any I've never had any like addiction issues. Um, but I don't like the feeling of being drunk. How does alcohol or the effects of alcohol drown out or make you feel that it feels like you're drowning out the pain?
It's for me, it's because it's a depressant and it slows you down.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So
oh,
go ahead,
you got
curator.
that one, Bert? Because
Go ahead and go through it.
all right, shit. See, that's just why they call this different types of drunks. Now, with people with like certain mental disorders, like, and there's like this is like a not really 100% science. People believe that since it gives you a lack of inhibitions, you start showing your real, personality. Where like me and my twin sister, when we would get drunk, we were confident in ourselves. We were happy. Nothing in the world could hurt us. We would just always enjoy. And the problem is when you keep into that, and the more you take, you're young and teenager, you think, you're like me and my best friend, like we when we were like 14, we were mixing fucking vodka and orange juice with Xannies, and we thought we were fucking badass. And
Speedballing, basically.
yeah, yeah.
Oh hell no.
And I had my dad's side of the family, for some reason, we have a stupid tolerance to sedatives. And I mean, even clinical sedatives, because that's a whole nother story for another time. But for the alcohol part, it's like you just keep doing it because it gets you away from the problem. It blocks it out, and then sometimes you black out and you're on autopilot and you say and do things you don't remember, and that's not an excuse for your actions. But some people will try to take advantage of that and said you said this when you were drunk.
It's
And my
escapism.
dad went through a problem with that, and he saw me hit my rock bottom, and I was saying things I didn't mean. He just was defending me the whole time, saying he's drunk. But my rock bottom ended me being in a isolation cell of a prison because I got pulled over, and apparently I felt I was fine. And the medication I was on then was, lowering the effects of the alcohol I was on, because at that point in my life I was drinking at work. And they took me, and apparently I had a 11.1, blood alcohol content, and they put me. I remember them putting me in the drunk tank, but I woke up in the isolation, the by yourself room with all my clothes gone and just a gown over me because apparently I was too violent. Because martial artists, and I'm put in a room with a bunch of people, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not in my current state of mind. And apparently I managed to break or crack the glass because this one cop kept harassing me. I guess I was asking for water, and he literally just brought a bottle to the window and poured it out on the floor in front of me. And he's like, "You want me to come in there and play with you?" And apparently, I tried to break through the glass. I ended up cracking it and busting my knuckles a block. And then they put me in an isolation cell. Yep. So that was my rock bottom. But for the most people, is just it gets you a high, basically. Like some people will use marijuana. For me and my twin, we can't use THC because we will have a bad trip.
Yeah, I could relate to that as well. Let me go ahead and answer the question too. So it's kind of hard where to start because I've been through a lot too. But I'll just kind of like touch on certain things. So
You're my brother.
when I was 12 in seventh grade, I was dealing with a lot of depression. I had adjusted to moving from if everybody lives in California that's watching this, I was living in the LA area, and then I moved to the San Bernardino area, which is an hour away. And back in the late 90s, this is a very big jump, from going an hour away. I didn't have no way to contact anybody I knew. So I was in a deep depression, and I was suicidal. I had suicidal ideations at 12 years old, and I was really like going through it really bad. And I brought a knife to school, not to hurt anybody else. I was
Yeah.
being bullied. I was being bullied every single day by all the kids. It was bad. And so I was going to end my life at school. And one of the kids in the class saw my knife and asked me what I was going to do with that. I told him, I was going to, commit suicide. He said, "Let's go to the bathroom. I'll help you. Let's go right now." I was like,
What?
okay, yeah. Literally told me, "Let's go." Huh?
He said, "I'll help you."
Yes, he said, "I'll help you. Let's go right now." 7th grade, mind you.
Well, was he joking with you, trying to help you, or was he serious?
No, he was going to help me kill myself. He was going to stab me because I was being bullied. When I say bullied, I was getting beat up every day to the point where I remember this one girl. I'm writing a book about my book right now, and I don't know. I can't remember her name, but I was being jumped in the bathroom with some boys because I was from LA, and that area people didn't like people from LA, so they were beating me up. And this girl came in the bathroom, the boys' bathroom, mind you, and sifted through the boys, said move, and grabbed me and took me out of there. I don't know I can't remember her name or anything, but I know she's an angel because she saved me. Um
Wow.
that's just one of the things. One other thing I want to touch on is it's been a story of my life is loss. I had a really good friend when I was 15. uh I was a church boy. I grew up born and raised in the church. And so at some time or another, three times a week or more, I was at church. And I was at church for youth night / choir rehearsal, and I made a friend. I love music. For those of you know, I rap and I sing. And I met this other boy. His name was Tori. He was a rapper as well around that time. So we were connecting on that. We became really good friends. And Tori didn't want to sing in the choir, but we had a youth church service afterwards that he was supposed to come to. So he was there right before rehearsal. I shook his hand and said, "All right, bro, see you in a second." Halfway through choir rehearsal, we hear pop, 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 pop. My friend got shot in front of my church.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man.
And uh I remember we all had to duck down because when it got announced, his cousin came to the front of the church and it was like, "Help, help!" And the choir director thought he was playing and was like, "Boy, go somewhere. No help!" And she ran outside. They called the police. We had to duck down for like an hour and a half. The church was an active crime scene. Crime scene. By the time we got out, my friend was no longer there, but they didn't have time to clean up his blood off of the church steps, and his blood was still there, and that was the last remnants of my friend. Like literally, I just saw, like I just saw him, so it was like, oh crap, this is real, and that led to a month and a half later, my grandma passing away, who lived with us. So it was like, okay, loss after loss. I'm going through everything. So I started to cope with weed first, marijuana. And then as I got older, I coped with a lot of losses, like with being homeless and stuff through sex. I thought that was the only proper way I could show somebody that I loved them, or that was the love. So I put an unrealistic thing on me. It's like I had to be good at sex, otherwise somebody would not love me. So I cope with that. I'm like skipping over a lot because I don't want to keep you too long, Aziza. Uh, but I use those things to cope for a lot. Also drinking, and I experimented with drugs, including methamphetamine and crack. I didn't. I said if I could smoke it, I would do it. That was my rule. If I could smoke it, I would do it. I wouldn't inject anything or take any pills. I would always say if I smoke it, I do it. And luckily, I never got addicted to anything. I was able to cold turkey it all the time. Like it was just in the moment type of thing. I felt the high or whatever. Okay, I did crack for 3 days today. Okay, I'm done with that. What's next?
Wow.
You didn't have you didn't have the addiction tendency in your brain.
Yeah, I was just able to cold turkey it. Like people ask how I quit smoking cigarettes, I just threw away a pack of cigarettes and said I was done.
That's how I was with cigarettes. Like cigarettes never, I saw, growing up, you with friends, they hand you one, like, yeah. It's like now I like it's more of a religious thing. Like when someone dies, like someone close to us, like a father figure, will smoke a little tobacco, and I still have the same pack of cigarettes from like 5 years ago, and I was maybe like two taken out of it.
Uh, the last part of it is how I cope, how I transcend my trauma now. Though is doing this, also reaching out to other people, having I'm always open to have any conversation, because if we don't have the conversations, then the stuff just festers. Like, you got to have these conversations, whether it's about sex, whether it's about trauma, whether it's about mental health, all of these taboo questions. They used to say there's two things you don't talk about in mixed company: religion and politics. And I said, well, I'll talk about both because I don't care. I'm a rebel.
You like that,
Facts.
brother?
Facts.
That's right.
That's the original conversation. If you can't handle that, I don't care what your feelings are towards it, but we can still have a healthy conversation. And I think part of that's what's wrong with society now is we're afraid of having conversations with people.
Right. We're afraid, people are afraid of getting uncomfortable. That's what it
Right.
is. And I mean, one thing, my motto is change is not made in comfort zones. You have to get uncomfortable. And I think even for healing from trauma, you can't be afraid of the pain. And I feel like people who fall into addiction just because they're trying to escape the pain. And I feel like you have to go through the pain at some point. You have to feel it
Right.
and you have to work through it. And it's like losing a loved one. You have to grieve the person that you were before the trauma happened, and then accept the person that you have become now because of the trauma, and then work from there. I lost my daughter, my last child, by my father. She died when she was 9 years old. And she had two medical conditions. She had spinal muscular atrophy, which is a muscular dystrophy disease where she could not, her muscles were very weak. So she had respiratory issues because your lungs and your heart are muscles. She was in a wheelchair. She needed assistance. She had to be on breathing support at night. And she also had a metabolic disorder. Now, because of the incest, she's the only person on medical record that had both diseases. They're recessive disorders that people carry the genes of. And because, I'm my father's daughter, I'm a carrier of those genes and he's a carrier of those genes. So there was a 1 in 4 chance, well, because of the incest, probably a 1 in 2 chance that we would create a child with the disease. Um, when she died, it was unexpected for me, even though I was told that she would not live for very long, but she surpassed all the milestones that the doctors gave her. And I was not home when she died. So, and I felt like, and I left her with someone, a nurse who I felt was negligent. So I had to deal with like a lot with losing her. I dealt with guilt. I dealt with, again, mistrust. My mom was there with the nurse when she passed away. I dealt with not knowing exactly what happened. I dealt with racial discrimination because the hospital refused to do an autopsy because they just said, well, she had the disease, so there's no need for investigation of why she died. So there was a lot, and I did go into deep depression. But I think what was important for me going through her loss, was feeling the pain of her loss, acknowledging it, and then being able to rise out of it and say, hey, you have other children to take care of. You have to continue to live your life. And it was until after she died, I was able to then put myself through college, finish writing my book, things like that. So, you know, I think that was like really the first time since my childhood and young adulthood. I know I was depressed during my young adulthood, during the height of my father's abuse, but after escaping him, I was just elated and so excited that I was free and I was able to meet people and get to know people. But then after losing her, that I feel like that really could have broken me. But I went through it, and I had to accept it and come out and do what I could do in order to move on and continue to raise my other children. So again, that was just another decision that I made.
Okay. The next segment is the wealthy health segment. I'm gonna make this one a little short before we transition to the next one. Does anybody have a source that you can point out for some people that are currently going through trauma? Sources for them to get help.
What?
988 is the international suicide line. 988.
For veterans, you can go through your VA resources as well.
And even if you're on TikTok, if you look up something like suicide, it would instantly just put up the number to suicide prevention. So it's like, like I'm a fan of Juice WRLD, as everyone knows. I'm looking for some of his audios. I usually have to record it, get off another platform and bring it to TikTok because a lot of it falls about depression, struggling with addiction, and thinking you're gonna die from because people only are fair weather friends. So that's one source I know. And AA groups, those are very shoddy in my opinion because those are ran by the Catholic churches. And being a Native American, we don't have a very good relationship with that.
Did you have one, Aziza?
Yeah, I have so I did start a nonprofit called Precious Little Ladies. Our mission is to combat child molestation and gender-based violence by strengthening the bond between mothers and daughters and educating the community and empowering families. We recently just partnered with BetterHelp, which is an online therapy platform to provide free therapy hours to women of color in low income communities. So yes, I'm excited about that because the stigma that does surround Black communities and getting therapy, and then there is the fact that we might not have access to decent mental health care, or can't afford it. So through PLL, you could receive free mental health care, free therapy hours for 6 months.
Can you say the site one more time? I'm going to put it on the screen right here, as well as it's going to be in the description below for everybody.
Okay, the email address. The website is preciouslittleladies.org. And you can email info@pllnonprofit.org and put in the subject line BetterHelp. So then we know that you're interested in the free therapy.
That is awesome.
Can you run by the name one more time so I can write it down for my platform?
PreciousLittleLadies.org. Right. That's the website.
All right, I got it.
Okay.
And then the other one was?
The email address is info@pllnonprofit.org.
Thank you. I will definitely be sharing that to some people.
I hope I'm not consuming much of your time. We have like 2 questions left, and one of them is funny.
Okay. I'm ready to laugh.
I'm allowed to be myself now.
Yeah, we're gonna play the good old game. You know we're about to play, guys. So we're going to the What Would You Do segment. Until we get questions, please email us at royalgeniusreviews@gmail.com. Please send us questions at royalgeniusreviews@gmail.com. Or if you listen to this on Spotify, you can also send a voice clip there. We will shout you out on the podcast if you need any advice for anything. But until then, we're going to play a game called Helpful and Unhelpful Advice.
Oh, Lord.
So I'm going to read a question that I found on a random, advice column, and everybody's gonna give one thing that's helpful and one thing that's unhelpful, like petty. So
okay. Let me take my triangle symbol off. I don't need no bad medicine.
Okay, and I'm only gonna do one question today, and then we're gonna go to the end after this. One last question, one real question. So here's the question: should I talk to my Black coworker about the fact that my white baby started crying when they met? I am a white parent with a white family in a predominantly white area. When my kids get closer to school age, we like to move to a more diverse area. And for now, I try to choose books and media with diverse characters. However, yesterday at a company party, my 4-month-old met a Black person, the significant other of a coworker. He had just finished telling me how much babies love him. Then my infant took one look at him and started crying. I gave a weak excuse about her being hungry, but it was transparent. I'm embarrassed and unsure if I should address the situation with my coworker or pretend it didn't happen. Any thoughts on how to handle my racist baby?
My girl's in the
Bad
background saying that's
advice.
fucked up.
Bad advice. Tell your person that your baby's racist that you were dealing with. Good advice, just ignore the situation because it's a baby.
Right.
Damn. Good advice. I'm gonna have to agree with Bert. Ignore the situation. And no. Okay, no, I changed that. Good advice. Give your baby books and show them books and videos of Black people of different races so they don't, they have some familiarity. It's not such a surprise when they see someone of a different race. That advice, damn, I'm not good at that.
Just be as petty as you can.
Bad advice would be to tell the person, I'm sorry for my baby, she doesn't like ugly people.
Okay, I'll go before you, curator. Good advice: just expose your child to more people. That's kind of your fault. I mean, I know you live in a certain area, but come on.
By expose, you mean keep the clothes on, by the way.
go to around different people and different areas so they can get used to people. I don't think a child is inherently racist. Racism is something that's taught.
Right.
Kids are afraid of things that are people that they haven't seen before.
That are different, right?
Yeah. Bad advice. You need to sit that child in front of the TV right now and put on Roots.
But that baby wants some BET Uncut.
Yeah, put on BET Uncut. Put on Tip Drill.
Episodes of Yo MTV Rap.
So real talk, like my son when he was a baby, when I was still in the military and everything, when he was first born, I let my hair grow out because I was off for a couple months, getting another child and everything. But when I had to go back into work, I got my head shaved, so I didn't have to deal with anything. I came out that barbershop and this baby was just traumatized over the whole situation. He saw me, he saw no hair, went. I'm like, I'm still dad. So what happens?
Well,
kids are something though. I mean, my son was 4 when I went through. Not long after my daughter passed away, I shaved all my hair off, and my son came in the bathroom and saw me. He was 4 and he looked at me. He said, "Mommy, why did you do that? Now you look like a boy." Because for some reason he had already developed this idea that girls are pretty when they have long hair and thick eyebrows. I have no idea where he got that from.
Well,
Was
Team Afro.
He was almost crying because I cut my hair. I was like, "It's okay, kid."
It will grow back.
Right.
Someone got it.
Hey, if I fuck up, it will go back.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, you might be mad that the hairline's a little jacked up, but it will grow back.
Okay, curator, go ahead. Unhelpful and helpful advice.
Okay, let's make sure. The mama's white and the daddy's black.
No, the mama's just white. She didn't say about her husband. I guess
mama's white, baby's white, daddy's white, baby saw black kid.
Black man at the party.
Black man.
Oh, shit. I'm already getting glared at. Helpful advice. Drop that baby off at the fire station. Try again. You already fucked up.
Did you say that was helpful?
Yeah, that's helpful. You fucked up. You can only try again. And only one. What's another kid? I was like, restart that. Just hard restart.
That's a helpful advice.
God damn.
You better be extra petty today, huh, curator? What's
unhelpful advice? Take them to a cookout without telling them. Take them to a Million Man March, saying you go to Disneyland. Hell, like when me and my ex were doing the marching in the BOM marches, I got winged in the shoulder by a stray bullet. Like it was like helpful advice. I'm bleeding with you, but no, that whole racist baby thing. Their eyes are not developed yet. So if you just shave your beard, it's gonna see you as a whole different person. This is why they always encourage skin to skin contact with mother and father.
Mhm.
But hey, maybe if the baby is racist, helpful, get all the crucifixes out the house. We don't want them to start making those and setting them on fire because the whole we don't need another Dahmer.
Right. Well, let's.
In all seriousness, unhelpful. Why are you already judging your baby on races? I feel like you're projecting your own uncomfortability on your baby.
Exactly.
I was like, you take a baby that's been in its crib and then you decide to dine out for the first time, and that baby cries, there's all the noise, and that waiter just happened to be a black guy. You're making that connection.
That's a good point. That's a good point, because there could have been all kinds of reasons why the baby cried, but to say
Exactly.
because the person was black, it's like, oh yeah.
It's like just a personal
at that a 4-month-old,
like a personal example I get in my area, Native American. Me and my girl go to a grocery store. We're checking out with each other. We're close together. People ask, "Are you two together?" Like, well, I can't go to this store again. Oh shit!
Well, let's go to the last segment with this question, and we're gonna close out here. The Black Life segment. Do you have any fears about the way society handles trauma now, especially when it comes to people of color?
I feel like I covered this one earlier. Yeah. So it's more or less the same thing. You have people that weaponize trauma for their bad behaviors. And honestly, it doesn't even just like stem with one group or one color or anything like that. It's a lot of different people that feel that they can get away with murder because of that. And I'm not saying murder hasn't killed people, although some people might think that too. It's just it makes it to where it invalidates those that are trying to become better.
But I think for me on an institutional level, I'm afraid that specifically with Black people, the quality of healthcare in general, mental health care not being believed, right? One thing that we have started or focused on is educating law enforcement on the sensitivities when dealing with Black women reporting domestic violence or sexual abuse, because they are less likely to report because they're afraid that the police are going to come in and either not believe them or use it as an opportunity to attack their Black man to a point that they didn't necessarily want it to go. So that's the part that is concerning for me, just how the system deals with Black people who have been traumatized. And a huge part is if they believe them or not. I mean, in healthcare right now, with Black maternity, women are in hospitals talking about they're paying. I was talking, most of my children were born at home. And my youngest son for my ex-husband, he was born in the hospital. And because I had already had 4 children who my father delivered, I, of course, was used to giving birth without any medical assistance. So here comes these doctors, and one, they're trying to understand why I was denying an epidural, why the sensors were showing that I was having these super strong labor pains, but I was not feeling or displaying how strong they were. And then at the point where I was fully dilated, they could not determine if I was fully dilated. And different doctors just would come in without speaking to me, without addressing me, without telling me what they were about to do, and just stick their fingers inside me to see how dilated I was and if it was time for me to push. So, and then my sister was talking about experience where her water broke they brought her to the emergency room and just left her sitting there. Nobody listened to her saying that her water broke. And then finally, an hour later, when somebody did, then they want to panic. Somebody listened, then they want to panic. So yeah, so that's my concern. The process on an institutional level with grieving and healing and supporting Black communities on the healing journey, it's so broken. So there's a lot of work to be done in order to fix it and fix the perspective of those in the medical industry and how they treat Black people when it comes to these issues.
That is the same concern of mine, especially for me. I've been in a lot of mental institutions, and the treatment has been horrible. It's a big difference in the way that that I was treated, and the way that other people were treated. You know, so like I had, if people in the medical field, if you know what dyskinesia is, it's something that I experience when I take Haldol and Thorazine, and I was experiencing that, which is, you know, your mouth starts to like, and I had a person that was working at the facility tell me, "You're faking. Nothing's wrong with you."
Yeah.
I fear that people of color, we just are not taken seriously. We're supposed to have the higher pain tolerance. We're supposed to deal with things more. So I feel like now, even now in society, even though it's getting a little better, I still feel like a person of color who's gone through something is not going to get the help that a white person will get.
Right.
Unfortunately, if you walk in there being white, you're, oh, let me help you. You're bleeding. Oh, you're not okay right now. A Black person, no, they'll be okay. We'll get to you when we get to you, type. So that is my fear, that this will continue. You know, unfortunately.
My goal really is to just say her piece on that, because that's one reason why she doesn't want to have kids. Because she was just telling me her mother was told that she couldn't have, like, an epidural thing until she lost 80 pounds, which is a bunch of bullshit. And the fact that someone was testing you on CC, like centimeters, with their hands, that just shows how low of training that our field is getting to. Because especially with nurses, CNAs, and down we have a new position called PTAs, which is the CNA's assistant. You got people, your instructor would just see you like, they're like, decide, oh, here's a Black woman with a job, let me just pass her. And, or here's someone who's a Native American, let me just pass them so we can check a box. Because it comes down to the facility having to have a certain demographic, mixture. And they're starting to, we have such a bad decline in healthcare when it comes to staffing, that they are just cutting corners left and right. And I've touched upon this before with the age-old stereotypes. Like, I forget his name, the guy who's credited for modern gynecology. He experimented on Black slaves because Black women and Black men had a higher pain tolerance. Even tattooists to this day think that Black people have thicker skin. And no, they don't. Pain is pain. And if you were in my ER and epidural, I could, look at your chart and see this is maybe a religious thing. Maybe you have the recessive gene for paraplegia, or, something like that. But when you are dilated, you can look at dilation. I don't need to stick my hand in you to see if you're dilated. Dilated means opening up. And that just kind of I'm sorry, that one kind of pissed me off. But no, see, that's where the red flag would fly up. Like, why is your pain tolerance this high? How many kids have you had? It's like, and then they should have been asking a lot of questions. And the fact that they were switching out doctors, you should have had one doctor overseeing that, a charge nurse. You should have had a small group of people focusing on you, not them just doing, oh, it's time for me to clock out. Let's get Cindy, who doesn't know how to read a chart, doesn't know anything about this woman, just knows she's pregnant and having a baby. It'll get out eventually. No, all the complications that can happen to the mother, the child, that people forget that, yes, we live in a more modern medical time and death at childbirth isn't a common thing anymore, but it still can freaking happen. It still happens and we still see it happen. And the mother can still die even if the baby is stillborn. And like I've seen babies come out with their umbilical cord, wrapped around their neck, or when they invert themselves and they're coming feet first. There's one procedure that a lot of people don't talk about because can't get in there and rotate the baby because we've only tried that so many times. The other option to make sure to get the baby out is we will literally take our finger and break the baby's clavicle bone so it will come out. But no one teaches us how to do that. We are told by the older doctors this is an emergency procedure, but there is nothing in a medical book that tells you the proper way to break a clavicle bone on a newborn child so you can save its life and the mother's life. And that's where you just feel glad for the baby not being aware of its own agony and not going to remember it.
All right, curator, go ahead and answer the question so we could end. Do you have any fears about the way society handles trauma now, especially when it comes to people of color?
Yeah, sorry, I kind of went off on soft subject on that. I mean, I'm sorry. Just yeah, but since my children will be biracial, and they're going to be Native American, German, and black, and that what I worry about is everyone's going to be wanting to put all the black stereotypes on them, and then when they say they have a Native father, they're a white father, they're going to be judged by being light skinned or just them opening up the door. I'm going to have to teach my kids at a young age how to talk to police. I have to teach my kids that, if a cop is scared by you, you can get shot and he's getting a paid vacation. There's Emmett Till, he didn't get his retribution until 144 years after his murder. Huh? Emmett Till, but if anyone's never heard about him, I suggest heavily looking him up. He's a 14-year-old boy during the civil rights movement that got barbed wire and drowned for supposedly whistling at a white woman, and then that woman later came out saying that on her deathbed that she lied. But
she just died last year or this year? This year.
Yeah, she just died. Yeah, I think.
Is it this year or last year?
I honestly can't remember. It's the fact that when I was in the Black Lives marches, I'm white passing. My father always told me that I can really be white passing, and I'd be glad for it. But I don't feel any need to hide my culture. But now with my children, I don't like that this world's still so dirty on mixing and black is bad or this is bad. Oh, black women are vicious, they're mean. Oh, that's why they're by themselves because they're too aggressive. That's a bunch of bullshit. It's there's assholes of every race, but point you do a peaceful protest and people want to shoot you. If they're looking for someone who stole, when it comes to being a black person, it's literally that your description is going to be he's anywhere from 4 foot to 9 feet, from 5 years old to 109, because you fit the description. And it's I don't think any baby should have to be treated, taught on how to not get shot by the people who are supposed to be the good guys. I got beat up by cops just for being Native. Because when I show them my ID, they see the Native ID, and then, but yeah, that the black community is always being mistreated in the medical field heavily, and I have to be careful how I say that. And when it comes to the legal system, it's ignored. If a black woman comes into an ER and says she was raped, a lot of people ain't gonna believe her. And but he's a veteran. If he say he got shot and he walked in the ER, they're going to instantly label gangbanger. And that's what it is. Or you have high blood pressure. You're openly ignored. And that's what bothers me with how the world handles the black community.
We're going to say something, AZIZA?
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that's as much as I can condense it because I see it. I see it. I date into it. Is like my girl don't want to come on to this and talk on it, but like she's told me some things too. Well, just a few seconds ago.
Right. It's definitely real. But just like that, guys, we're gonna end the episode here. I want to give a special thanks to you, Aziza, for coming on and spending time with us. I know it's all of us guys here, but you.
It's fun. It was cool. I don't get to talk to men very often, so well, in this capacity, like doing
Right.
interview stuff. So
Just letting you know, Aziza, I gave you a follow on Instagram as well.
okay, thank you. I will follow you.
And I want to thank everybody for watching this. I love each and every one of you guys. Don't forget to email us at royalgeniusreviews@gmail.com. Watching this on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. Help us climb up in the ranks on Spotify and all of that good stuff. The typical, YouTube outro and all of that good stuff.
Give me good questions to mess with them.
Go ahead.
I was saying, please send more questions so I can continue to mess with Bert and Royal.
What were you saying, Aziza?
Oh, I was gonna say my Instagram handle is AZIZA KIBIBI, and also you can check out everything is on there, but also my website azizakabibi.com. And I wrote a book called Unashamed of Life Tainted, which is a memoir, and it chronicles my life surviving my father, escaping him, and eventually getting him in jail for 90 years. So.
I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate all the viewers that we have. Please, if you have not, go check out Aziza KIBIBI. She is amazing for the way that she's helping everybody and sharing her story in such a transparent way. So, thank all you guys, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, we love you all.
Peace.
Bye.